Come on up, Christian anarchists. What you want to
Hello,
debate
hello, can you
about?
hear me?
How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I just had a bit of a question about, the debate you just had, sort of thing.
Sure.
And I'm
What you
only
got?
going to speak just for a little bit because I got to dip after this. But so you were debating about abortion, and you were bringing up points about, like, for example, like systemic poverty and sex education and all these sorts of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's my position that, like, before I think we should even touch, abortion legislation, we would need to have all that infrastructure in place, like more subsidies for the foster care industry and the contraceptive industry, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but I was sort of wondering if we had those systems in place, would you then like still advocate for it being pro-choice, or do you think abortion should be legal at that point?
I would still be pro-choice, but I think if you had services like that, you would actually have a huge reduction in abortion rates. Yes. I think like people naturally would make that decision for themselves. You would not need to legislate it.
But why wouldn't you need to legislate it? Because obviously, like you said, we'd see a reduction in abortions that happen out of like desperation, for example. So it would seem to be that, like, even like right now, the majority of abortions that are had are done for convenience sake. And that would certainly be the case of even more so,
Well,
proportionally,
right
if we
now
had
they're
this.
not necessarily done out of convenience sake. For example, in Florida, it's illegal. I think 6 weeks. Anywhere after, most women aren't even aware they're pregnant at 6 weeks. And so, like, the fact that there is a 6 week ban in Florida means there's basically zero abortions. Every single clinic is closed. The only difference is now they basically have to go to, I think it's either North Carolina or South Carolina. It's the only area. They basically have to go hundreds of miles to be able to access the abortion just because it's now up to the states. It's nonsense.
Well, I mean, obviously, whether or not an abortion should be accessed in the first place is going to depend on whether it's moral, right? And whether or not it can be, as practical alternatives, right?
What do you consider? Why do you, if you're in favor of morality, yes?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of morality for sure,
Okay. So, why do you care about something that is moral versus immoral?
because that's what it means to care about morality. Like, I mean,
So you care
like,
about morality because you care about morality? Is that your argument?
well, if you're asking me a meta ethics question, I suppose I believe that there are, immaterial moral objects or something that in line with the belief of the correspondence, what's it called? The correspondence theory of truth or whatever it's called. Um, I believe that propositions relating to morality refer to those things, I guess, but I don't see what that has to do with
So you've got like some underlying
well, it would
ethereal thing that
no,
represents the moral. What?
no, it wouldn't really matter. Like if I was to just say
No,
here
no.
like that,
So,
my
so
morals is
like I can
if
back up
I was to
why I
hold to that
consider
position.
my like some why I pursue something moral versus immoral. Right. I think that like all morality stems from a propagation of survival, and I think that like it's not just to survive, but actually to like live a quality of living that allows more of Maslow's hierarchy of needs to be satisfied versus less. Right. And so
Oh, so
if you're talking
uh,
about situations where by having this child, it makes life worse. That makes me go, okay, well, that's not something that I would morally find acceptable, right? Because I have a predication of why I consider something like to be moral versus immoral, right? So I'm asking you, like, what is it? And you're I have no idea
uh,
what you just explained. To me, it sounded like that you said that there are these ethereal things that represent that morality and that you uphold that. I have no idea what the fuck that
I,
means.
I think I misunderstood your question. Are you sort of asking me if I'm a consequentialist? Because yes, I am. I judge it based on the consequences, I guess.
Okay, so would you say that more poverty is that good? Like, let's say you
In the
uphold
abstract,
the
no,
life
but
thing, more poverty, that good?
well, obviously poverty is not good, right?
Okay, so you
But
want less poverty in society, right?
well, yeah, it's a classic trolley problem, right? So like if you've got a set of bad circumstances on one end, but in order to avoid those bad circumstances, you have to bring about worse circumstances. then you'd bring about the least bad circumstances, right?
Yeah, I agree. But do you understand that that's an argument from choice, right?
Well, no, because it's a question
Because
of,
you're
all
giving
right,
no, no,
do,
you're giving variability to the fact that, hey, in some situation it could be pretty bad, right? Like, would you say that crack baby probably, probably abort that, probably just kind of needless suffering for no reason?
No, not necessarily. Like, I
What?
don't think just because you're a crack baby, you lack the right to life. But I think there are certain
What?
situations, for example, where if the baby is going to die, and like we can know that about like to a reasonable degree of certainty, right? Or like if the mother's life is in danger, for example, then I would entertain the idea of abortion. But that's not the question of choice. That's a question of if the actual facts of the matter, which choice has nothing to do with, if those facts of the matter, are such that, someone's going to die if they
Well, I
have this
agree with
baby.
you in the fact of the matter of 20 weeks, but again, I've already given my predication as to why I even care about that to begin with. So
So, so your
I'm
cutoff line is
lost.
20 weeks.
Hmm?
Your cutoff line is 20 weeks.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so if somebody has an abortion at 18 weeks, do you consider them a murderer?
No,
But they're taking a life by your definition, wouldn't they?
that's correct. The question is whether or not it's worthy of moral consideration. A murder is where you
But,
are taking a life unjustifiably, right?
by the way, I
So it
misspoke. I meant to
basically
say
has
20.
to be justifiable.
Right. So I understand that there are certain situations in which we either have to take a life or let somebody die. In certain situations, I just don't agree that abortion is necessarily those situations, right? And I don't think it should come down to the individual choice of the person. Like, I don't think, if you're saying that somebody's
Why?
born a crack baby, I don't
Do you
think
have
the
an
crack
instance where
mother should be.
someone where you can uh, take away the autonomy of an individual on the basis of another individual?
Absolutely, prison. When we put murderers in prison, right, we take away their autonomy so that they don't go killing more innocent people, right? Like
Okay,
the,
yeah,
the
sure.
entire
Fair
concept,
enough.
the entire concept of like
Fair enough.
having anything
I
at
should have
all.
seen that.
Yeah.
So, um, I mean, I get your argument. I think that by upholding your moral system, I think you're making society worse. Society gets worse by upholding this strict moral standard. And the reason why we care about morals is because outcomes. And again, you've argued that the consequentialism is the move. So I think that you actually can't be pro-life if you want to
Well,
maintain your consistency.
let's look at the two choices we have here, right? On the one hand, we either let the babies live, and then there's maybe an increase in poverty, which, by the way, can be addressed through systemic means rather than just abortion, right? We can have welfare for pregnant people, for example. I'm massively in favor of that. Or on the other end of the trolley problem, we kill children. Now, just me personally,
Well,
maybe this is an
I would have
intersubjective
both.
thing. I would think
I,
killing
I,
children is a bad outcome.
I would just have both. I
Killing
would have
children and poverty?
the
I think
killing children.
that's worse.
The killing children. We're talking about killing a fetus, and the question is whether or not it's worthy of moral consideration, right? You're obviously you wouldn't load your arguments, right?
Well, like, yeah, obviously that's the very thing in question, right? Like, at what point does life become life? But I don't
No,
think that the
it's
answer to
life.
that
It's
question
life
comes.
at conception. The question is not whether or not it's life at conception. The question is whether or not that it's worthy of moral consideration. Do you understand the
Right.
difference?
I get what you're saying, right? But whether or not somebody possesses moral rights and moral and human rights does not come down to whether or not other people choose to recognize that. Not in the moral sense, maybe in the
What?
practical sense, but not in the moral sense.
What? That's
Well,
not
for
true.
example,
Where are you getting
so
that?
okay, so you're saying that whether or not
What's
you as an
stopping
individual have the
everybody
right.
in town from coming into your house and ripping you apart right now?
Well, like I said, in a practical sense, nothing. They could do that if they wanted
That's
to, but in
correct.
a moral sense,
That's
rights. Like
correct.
I
And
believe
honestly, if
in
you
the
think
concept of
about it,
human
right,
rights.
there's like a government that has like a monopoly of force that like enforces your rights. But honestly, if the government just kind of wanted to yeet you, they probably could and get away with it.
Yeah,
Like it would be really, really hard to stop. Like, so no,
and that
like
would be morally
there's,
wrong. Yeah,
well, okay, whatever. But I'm just saying that could just be taken away at any moment. But that's not the point. The point that I keep trying to make is that the reason why you care about things is because of outcomes. And obviously the outcomes are better by having access to abortion. And I could provide you the studies that show that outcomes do get better when people have access to abortion.
Do any of those studies say that killing children is,
Why are you
morally
loading the question?
like the,
We're talking about a
well,
fetus, not
because
a child.
well, that's the whole
And
thing.
we're also
The
talking
basis
whether or
of
not
the pro-life argument,
that it's
the basis of the
worthy of moral consideration. You're baking into your basis of definition. Talk about what it is. A fetus. It's a fetus. It's not a child, right? A tree is not a
the
seed.
very thing we're arguing
Is a
about.
tree a
All right,
seed? It's not a seed, right?
we're
A
getting
seed is not a
we're
tree. So
getting
a
into we're
fetus
getting
is
into the
not
speciest.
isn't a baby. Not yet. It will be eventually if they seek it to term.
Well, because of the arbitrary line you've drawn at 20 weeks, that's just an arbitrary determination you've made. Like nobody actually knows the line at what point where it crosses. So,
Wait, whether or
like,
not something's arbitrary doesn't mean it's like something that's not worthy of consideration. Like, what are you talking about?
what I'm
What is this
talking about
argument?
is that you keep trying to say, well, it's a fetus, it's not a baby. That's the very thing in question.
Yeah, we're
That's what
talking
the
about a
debate is
fetus,
essentially.
not a child, right? When you hear child,
That's
I
what we're
think like a
debating about.
5-year-old that I took to the bank, and then they go to the banker, and then they say, "I would like a lollipop, please." That's what I think about when I hear child, right? I don't think a fucking like a fucking little like bean inside a uterus. Okay,
Well, I'm very happy you have a Freudian word association with the word child that, invokes a certain image in your head, but that has nothing to do with the definitions
what's a
which are going to
fetus?
determine
What does that
whether or not
invoke?
something has
What
the
does that
right to
invoke? Does
life.
that invoke child?
I don't. What are you trying to ask me if the word fetus invokes an association with the word child?
Yeah.
I
Do you
mean, I
think it's like
suppose so.
Do you think it's like
Kind
child
of.
in your brain?
I don't
That's weird.
associate it with adult. I
That's
don't
weird.
associate it
All
with
right, let
adult.
me ask you this. We're gonna try this. Do you
Hang on, my
think?
mic cut out.
Do you think? Yeah. No, I'm thinking. Do you think? Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I can hear you. Sorry,
All right. There's a burning building. Okay.
I've heard this. Yeah.
What? What's wrong?
Sorry. Go on. I've heard the example. Sorry, go on.
There's a
Sorry,
burning building, and there is a literal baby crying in a crib, right? And then there is also a large a large tray full of fetuses that will be put into a mother the next day. There's like, I don't know, there's like 100 of them. There's like 100 of the fucking fetuses. Okay, ready to go, right? Are you saving the tray or the baby?
Yeah. So to sort of preface this argument, my answer to this question, I want to just sort of explain something real quick, right? So how I ground the value of life, right, is I ground it in its potential, right, what it could be, right? So
Just say the
so
fucking
for
tray.
example,
Say it. Just own the fucking ridiculous.
no,
Go
no, no,
ahead.
no, no, no,
What
no,
is
no, no,
it?
no, no, no.
Just
No, I
give
would
me your
take. All right,
answer.
all right. I'm going to give you my answer. I would take the baby, but I want to explain my answer why. Okay, so I would ground the value of human life in its potential of what it could be. All right. So, for example, um, sorry, someone's messaging me. One sec. So, I would ground it in its potential of like what it could be. Right. So, for example, an 80-year-old man has. It sounds pretty horrible, but an 80-year-old man probably doesn't have as much value as a baby, even though they both have the right to life, because the 80-year-old man doesn't have much time to live, right? Now, as somebody who's already born, somebody who's already a baby, has a greater, like, I'm going off of, statistics here, a greater propensity to actually have been alive, right? They're already alive, and they're, they have a greater future
Wait,
ahead of them,
the
presumably.
fetuses are
The
alive.
fetus, but the fetuses, there
And
are
they're going to
all
be put
sorts of
into a baby
complications.
tomorrow.
Yeah, I
Or
understand that.
into,
The
not a
fetus,
baby. We're not going to make a baby pregnant. A mother.
yeah, no. Yeah, in the case of the mother, because of things like miscarriages and all that sort of stuff, there's a greater likelihood that each of those fetuses, that something could go wrong. So therefore, somebody who has the right to life already versus somebody, because I don't necessarily think that life even begins at conception in terms of moral
So
consideration.
you are
But
giving less moral consideration towards fetuses than you are babies.
correct. But I
So
would.
you shouldn't be calling a fetus a child
Well, no, like
because it's not equal.
Like, I
It's
would
not the
give more
same.
moral hang on. I would give more moral consideration to a 2-year-old than a 5-year-old, but I would still consider both of them children. Right? Like if
Do
I
you
was in a
taste
burning
that?
building, I could only save one. I
Do
would
you
save the
taste that?
2-year-old.
It's it's so sour. That's such a
I
sour
don't
take.
I don't really care. I mean, you can feel
My
that
dude,
way,
my
but I
dude,
don't.
my dude. Obviously, you don't think that
What's
a
wrong with
fetus is the
what's wrong?
same as a child. You've
Not
made that
exactly the
clear to
same.
me.
I don't think an
You
apple is the same as
obviously
an
grant
orange.
much more
I don't think
moral
an apple is the same as an
consideration.
orange.
You
They're both
grant
fruit.
much more moral consideration towards the baby than you do the fetus. The
Yes,
fact that you are not
and
willing to save 100 fetuses is a perfect example that even if you have 100 fetuses, that it doesn't match. It is not equal to that of a literal living child, in which, by the way, I agree with you. And honestly, do you know why? You can make more. Whereas like the baby, that's like a lot of fucking work. Like you're talking like 9 months. Like all I got to do is just get 100 women pregnant and then pull the fucking fetus out. And then there you go. Now you got more fetuses. Okay. Not a big deal. Right. They spend the next 3 weeks, but that fucking baby, that's like 9 months. That's assuming it's a newborn. Right. And then you didn't feed the shit out of it. Right. It's now like 2 years old or whatever. Like obviously like the child is much more valuable than 100 fetuses. It's not even close. And
all
you
right. Well,
acknowledge
let me
that
go
as well.
ahead. Let me go ahead and lay out my value of hierarchies, right? Like in terms of like what I value, right? In terms of this particular situation, the baby is at the top of my priorities list for sure. We both agree on that. The next step in that hierarchy is those 100 fetuses. I place the value of the baby more. Then you know what takes a step lower than that? The convenience of the mother. So if there was some sort of weird situation in which I could save both, but it's going to be very difficult for the mother because she's going to be a bit financially harder off, I would still accept, that yeah, she's going to be financially harder off and still try to save the, fetuses or
But what
whatever.
about the
So in
rest of
terms of the
society?
hierarchy of value,
Do you place any value on
I,
that?
of
Because
course I do.
society gets
But
worse, right? When someone who doesn't want to have the child has to carry that child to term, society gets worse. That's for sure.
well, yeah, like net, like overall, but like it would be even worse. So it's like taking
What?
the
As
autonomy
opposed to
of the
having
mother is
abortion?
bad.
That's not true. Where'd you get that?
Hang on. Let me answer the question because I've got to dip. I've got to like dip now, basically. But
Mhm.
I'll just answer the question and dip. Right? Forcing somebody to have an abortion sucks. It fucking sucks. Right? Taking someone's autonomy, it's not an ideal thing to do. It is my position that terminating the pregnancy, whether you want to call it a fetus or a child or however you want to define it, the ethical value of terminating it would be of a greater cost than the autonomy. I'm weighing both of these things up, in trying to do the ethical calculus here, as they call it, utilitarianism, and I come to the conclusion that allowing the abortion is going to be of a greater cost. Now, that's not going to be the case in all circumstances, because there'll be some situations in which maybe there's a conversation to be had that if the woman has been raped, the psychological damage of having that kid could lead to suicide. There's a conversation to be had there. But in general, if it's just convenience, if it's just the convenience of the mother, I'm against it.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this.
Last thing, because I gotta go.
Yep. Are you in favor of social safety nets or no?
100%. I'm like fully anti-capitalist.
Okay. By the way, you can
In
be
fact, I think capitalism is
pro-capitalist
the
and be in
reason.
favor of social safety nets. Like, Jesus.
Yeah, I'm aware. I think capitalism is like
I'm
the
just
main
saying they're
reason
not
this is.
antithetical to one. Anyway,
Yeah.
whatever. It's fine.
Yeah, I know.
I'll let you have the
I'm just
last
explaining.
word, and then that'll be it. Okay. Go ahead.
Nah, it's all good.
You
I've
good?
said my piece. It's all good.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it was good talking to you, Christian Anarchist. Thank you for joining the stream.